Hi, there's something most of us were taught very early, without anyone saying it out loud. Without a lesson or a rule, we were just taught, quietly, consistently, that some feelings are okay to have and some are not. So we learned to manage, to contain, to push things down when the timing wasn't right, and we got good at it. Really good. The smile when we were hurting, the calm voice when we were falling apart inside, the I'm fine that came out so automatically we almost believed it ourselves. And maybe it worked. Maybe it still works on the surface, but your body has been keeping score. And today I want to talk about what's actually happening inside you, physiologically, measurably, scientifically, when you suppress your emotions. Not to alarm you, but because understanding this might be the thing that finally makes it okay to stop. Let's start with what suppression actually is. In psychology, emotional suppression is defined as the conscious effort to inhibit emotion-related thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. You feel something, and then you work, actively, even if automatically, to not show it, sometimes to not even feel it. James Gross and Robert Levinson at Stanford, 1993, conducted one of the first studies to measure what happens in the body during emotional suppression. Participants were shown a film designed to provoke disgust. Some were told to suppress their reactions. Others were not. Result, the suppressors showed significantly increased cardiovascular activity, elevated heart rate, higher blood pressure compared to those who expressed freely. The emotion wasn't gone, it was stored. Read that again slowly. They weren't feeling more, they were suppressing, and yet their hearts were working harder. What this tells us is something that changes everything. Suppression doesn't reduce the emotional experience, it amplifies the physiological cost. Your brain still processes the emotion. Your nervous system still responds. The difference is that you've removed the outlet, the expression, the movement, the release, while the internal pressure continues to build. Think of it this way. Imagine holding a door shut against the wind. The wind doesn't stop because the door is closed. You just have to keep pushing, constantly. Every moment that door needs to stay shut, your body is spending energy to keep it that way. Bessel Kolk, psychiatrist and author of The Body Keeps the Score, 2014, documented through decades of clinical work and neuroimaging research how unexpressed emotional experiences, particularly chronic suppression, become stored in the body as physical tension, altered stress hormone patterns, and dysregulated nervous systems. His research showed that unprocessed emotion doesn't disappear. It reorganizes itself into the body's physiology. This is where it gets important. Chronic suppression, the kind that becomes a habit, a personality, a way of moving through the world, has been linked in research to elevated cortisol levels, impaired immune function, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, disrupted sleep, and what researchers call emotional blunting. A gradual numbing where you stop feeling the difficult emotions, but also, slowly, the good ones. You wanted to feel less pain, and you got less of everything. Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, 2007, found through fMRI research that simply labeling an emotion, putting a word to what you feel, reduced activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, and increased activity in the prefrontal cortex. The act of naming alone was enough to begin regulating. Suppression, by contrast, keeps the amygdala activated while consuming prefrontal resources in the effort to hold the experience down. Naming what you feel calms your brain. Suppressing it tires it. You've been here before. The meeting where someone said something that stung, and you kept your face completely neutral, nodded, maybe even smiled, and then drove home in a silence so loud you couldn't hear the radio, and then felt your shoulders around your ears for 3 days without knowing why. Or the conversation where you needed to say something that mattered, and instead you said, "It's fine." And it wasn't fine, and some part of you knew it, but the moment passed. And now it lives somewhere just below the surface, a pressure you can't quite locate. Or maybe it's subtler than that. Maybe it's the way you always move quickly past your own feelings, the way you can be the person everyone processes with, the steady one, the calm one, while quietly having no idea what you yourself actually feel. You've learned to be so good at managing what's inside that you've almost lost the ability to find it. And here's what makes it complicated. You didn't do this wrong. You did this because at some point in some room with some person, it wasn't safe to feel it fully, and you adapted beautifully, intelligently. But adaptation that was once protective can become a prison without a key. Here's what I want to offer you, not as advice, as a different way of seeing. We've been taught to think of emotions as things that need to be managed, controlled, kept appropriate, expressed at the right time, in the right amount, in the right setting, and so we treat them like problems to be solved, impulses to be disciplined, inconveniences to be scheduled for later. But what if emotions aren't problems? What if they're information? Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio spent decades studying patients with damage to the emotional centers of the brain. His finding, documented in his landmark research on the somatic marker hypothesis, was surprising and decisive. People who could no longer feel emotions could also no longer make decisions, not because they lacked intelligence, but because emotions carry data that logic alone cannot access. Your anger is telling you something was crossed. Your grief is telling you something mattered. Your anxiety is telling you something feels uncertain, and your system wants to prepare. Your numbness, that quiet exhaustion of feeling nothing, is telling you that you've been holding the door shut for so long that the mechanism is starting to wear down. James Pennebaker at the University of Texas, 1997, conducted a series of studies showing that people who wrote about difficult emotional experiences for just 15 to 20 minutes over several days showed measurable improvements in immune function, reduced cortisol levels, and fewer doctor visits in the months that followed compared to those who wrote about neutral topics. The act of acknowledging emotion, even privately, had direct physiological effects. Not processing the emotion, not resolving it, not reaching any conclusion. Simply acknowledging that it was there. That's the reframe I want to offer. Feeling your emotions is not weakness. It is not losing control. It is not inappropriateness. It is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Gather information, process experience, and release what has already happened so it doesn't have to be carried forward. Suppression doesn't protect you from your emotions. It just makes you carry them longer, in a heavier form, in a place you can't see. The goal was never to feel less. The goal was always to feel, and then be able to move. There is something I want to sit with for a moment before we close. Across many traditions, not religious ones specifically, but across centuries of human wisdom about what it means to be whole, there's a thread that appears again and again. The idea that the body is not an obstacle to the inner life. It is the inner life, that what you feel physically, somatically, in the tightness of your chest and the weight of your shoulders, and the way your breath gets shallow before a hard conversation, is not noise to be filtered out. It is signal. It is communication. It is you talking to you in the only language that doesn't lie. To feel is not to fall apart. To feel is to be in contact with what is real. And maybe there's something almost like trust in that. Trust that you can feel this thing fully and not be destroyed by it. Trust that the wave will pass. Trust that on the other side of the feeling is not more feeling, but a kind of quiet, a settled place, the still water after the movement. You've been holding your breath for a long time, not because you can't breathe, but because somewhere along the way you learned that breathing fully, letting yourself actually feel the air, was something to be careful about. You can let that go now, not all at once. Not with a dramatic exhale, just a little more room, a little more permission for whatever is actually there. Your emotions are not your enemy. They never were. They are the part of you that is still paying attention, still tracking what matters, still trying in the only way it knows how to keep you honest with yourself. The work isn't to feel less. The work is to build enough safety inside yourself that feeling doesn't have to be dangerous anymore. And that is slower work than anyone tells you. It doesn't happen in a video. It doesn't happen in a moment of insight. It happens in the small choices. To notice, to name, to let it be there just for a second before you decide what to do with it. If this found you at a time when something is being held, I hope it helps. Even a little to know that holding it isn't the only option. There's more here whenever you're ready. Take your time. Find your still.